Why is Al-Aqsa such an important area to Palestinians?
It is the third holiest place on earth. It's the first destination for prayer before Al-Kaaba. It was actually in the courtyards of Jerusalem. This is why it's especially important for Palestinians and Muslims worldwide.
Palestinians are more than Muslims, though. There are Christian Palestinians. So is there a reason why Christian Palestinians should also care so much about the Al-Aqsa area?
Yes. There are a number of very important churches in Jerusalem, namely the Church of Nativity, which is considered to be the place of birth for Jesus Christ. He was born there. They all see that they're one nation, and they all feel like they are under the same threat, which is the Israeli occupation that is not distinct when it's fighting all of them.
But it's clearly important to Jews as well. And isn't Israel just trying to put forward the idea that this area should be shared with Jews as well? So why can't Palestinians just share the space?
The issue here is that after gulping big amounts of land and also neighborhoods and making people leave their houses and just demolishing Palestinian houses, taking over entire Palestinian neighborhoods and displacing them, Israelis doing that to Palestinians, obviously. That just didn't stop there. They also considered also changing the status quo, changing the original agreement that has been made and highlighted several times, especially in the 1878. There was actually an affirmation in the Berlin Agreement that says that the status quo of Al-Aqsa should not be changed, and that is that the Al-Aqsa courtyards are only for visitation for the Jewish people and for prayer for
How could Israel, how could Palestine attain a long-term peace around Al-Aqsa?
A long-term peace? Well, that is very, very difficult question. In fact, indeed, because when you think about peace, when you think about all of it, just you have only two sides. You have an aggressor and you have the aggressed. You have the bully and the bullied. And for Palestinians, especially, I'm sure that you have seen footage of Palestinians during Ramadan praying, elderlies, children, people with their own kids are being attacked and bit down and shot with steel rubber-coated steel bullets in their eyes and their extremities, and you've seen all of that. You have those people; they're unarmed, they're just praying. You have another person attacking them. You have an army with weaponry attacking them. So the matter of how to maintain peace in Jerusalem or in Palestine, it's not something you have to ask Palestinians. You have something you have to ask the aggressor. And you see that Gaza Strip is very polluted. It's overpopulated, and every couple of years they just come along, they raid us and shower us with chills and grenades and whatnot. And this is what's going on. We don't have the sovereignty. We don't have the land to have sovereignty.
It's a confounding. Israel confounds Zionism with Judaism. And as you said, what it does is it gives them a very, very useful anti-Semitism card to play. By understanding why the Al-Aqsa area is so important to Jews, we can help understand and critically analyze Israel's basis for its Flag Day marches and so on.
Zionism and Judaism are two totally differing concepts. Judaism is a religion going back thousands of years, full of morals and ethics and compassion. Zionism is a comparatively new, about 100 odd years old, nationalist, secular concept set up by people of Jewish extraction, admittedly, but people who have gone away from the teachings of Judaism. According to Judaism, we have no right whatsoever to set up a nation of our own. We are taught that we have to live in any country in which we find ourselves, and we have to live in accordance with the wishes of the indigenous population of that country and comply with their way of life. The Jewish nation started about 3,500 years ago. We were told we would be given the land of Israel to live our lives in the land of Palestine. We're subject to living our lives according to certain standards which were required of us. And our teaching is that those standards were sadly not complied with, and we were taught that if we didn't live to those standards, then the Jewish people would be sent into a divinely decreed exile. And that has been the situation for the last 2,000 years. And we are taught that we cannot fight against this exile. This is the wish of the Almighty. And if we fight against this exile, we are trying to oppose the wishes of the Almighty. And we're warned that if we try to oppose those wishes, there will be very, very serious consequences.
So is there a line or a paragraph in Jewish scripture which explains that, look, Judaism and the Jewish people are expected to live their lives within this context?
They are subject to an oath, or oaths, actually 3 oaths to the Almighty. But basically, these oaths are that we are subject to the oath that we will not in any way rebel against the wishes of the Almighty as far as this exile is concerned. And if we do, we are told that there will be very, very serious consequences. We are taught that there was a period in time when the Jewish temple existed. There was a time in our history, and that was a very, very important part of our history. And it's very holy and very important to us. But it's only important to the extent that we revere that area and we pray in that area. But in no way do we have a right to impose ourselves as being the masters of that area, because we are, according to our divinely decreed exile, we are subject to the wishes of the indigenous population, which is the Palestinians, and we cannot impose our authority on an area which they do not want us to have authority over. So when you say it's important to Jews, it's important as far as our religion is concerned, but not to the extent that we can in any way impose ourselves on that area and take it over.
My question for Rabbi Feldman is, why is Israel being so provocative? So, is it not enough to defy these Jewish instructions? Why are they being so provocative to the communities around them as well?
It unfortunately goes together. It's because they turn their back to God and to his religion, and they turn their back to the teachings of their grandparents. Therefore, unfortunately, they do all this harm to other people. When one loses or lacks their religious requirements, many times they lose their moral obligations to one another. And unfortunately, we do find what was mentioned throughout this conversation, so much wrong has been done to the Palestinian people, and this is totally criminal. I must mention there are so many of them who might be totally ignorant. Because of this massive propaganda, they think and believe that in order to be Jewish, you need to support Israel. In order to fulfill your religious requirements, you have to kill other people, which is so sad and so embarrassing. Unfortunately, when we see the pictures of these marches, we see people, with payas, with side locks. We see people obviously looking Jewish, religious Jewish. But we need to realize that, as Rabbi Cohen mentioned before, that these actions committed by these people in no way become religious, because the people perpetrating them claim to be religious. These acts remain anti-Jewish. It remains criminal according to international law. It remains unjust and inhumane.
But what arguments does Israel put forward that convinces so many of their citizens that, yes, the Flag Day March, the aggression towards Palestinians, in breaking into the Al-Aqsa mosque and so on, this is all completely fine under Judaism?
That they are attempting to transform Judaism from what it was to what it was for thousands of years to a new concept. Now, when they come up with this new concept and they claim that this is Judaism, now masses of people from the Jewish community and from outside the Jewish community who might be not so knowledgeable to understand the exact details of what is happening, but at the end of the day, the Zionist movement have people believe that this new version of Judaism is Judaism. We have people who are from the very young age being indoctrinated into this new Jewish education, this new Jewish face of all these concepts, the Western Wall was always considered a holy place for Jewish people, but with no condition that it has to be owned by Jewish people. It was only when the Zionist movement first came in, and by the way, this was before 1948, when the Zionist movement came in and started all these provocations, at that point, all these problems began at the Western Wall, at Al-Aqsa, and in the rest of Palestine. And I will mention and I will quote a letter of Rabbi Sonnenfeld, who was the chief rabbi in Palestine in the 1920s. And he wrote a letter to the Muslim Congress of Jerusalem in the beginning when these conflicts began at the Western Wall. And he wrote in his letter as follows: Jews have no intention to challenge the rights of Muslims to their holy sites, or even to demand any rights to those places. And he continues later as follows: as far as the Western Wall, the place from which the divine presence never departed, our only wish is that we are allowed the same privileges as was allowed to our grandparents, to pour out our hearts in prayer, respectfully, without disturbance. It was 1967 when the Israelis, when the Zionists had a war, and in their words, got this privilege of having the Temple Mount as Jewish, in their words. At that time, it was the great Grand Rabbi Teitelbaum, who was a very famous rabbi originally from Europe. He was a Holocaust survivor. Then he was the chief rabbi of Jerusalem, and then he moved to the United States, and he gave an edict telling to his followers, Jewish people should no longer visit the Western Wall, despite it was so precious and so important for the Jewish people, because we should never give credit for the Zionist movement for their so-called achievements. This was no achievement. This was a disaster for the Jewish people, whether it was regarding the Western Wall, whether it was this whole state of Israel. This Zionist movement and any of their so-called achievements was, and continues to be a serious tragedy, a Nakba, a catastrophe for the Palestinian people, and a disaster for the Jewish people as well. We never needed security in Palestine. We were always secured, we were always safe and respected. All these problems that the Zionist movement claim that Jewish people have and that they need security is just because of the Zionist movement. Our security is not the state of Israel. Our security is needed because of the state of Israel. And we say we refuse the security of the state of Israel, and we refuse the danger that they have brought upon us all, together with so many other people.
We'll never have peace with the Palestinians as long as Zionism exists. You will have peace in Palestine, which is different. You'll have peace in Palestine if Zionism comes to an end.
That when it comes to this massive propaganda machine, that if you say a word against Israel, you're anti-Semitic. By putting all these things in the right perspective, we start to learn that criticizing crimes committed by people who happen to be from Jewish descent doesn't make this criticism anti-Semitic, because these criticism to these crimes basically have nothing to do to the people perpetrating that crime. It's basically criticism to the crime.
This is a conversation. This is a cause that anyone can join. It's not about being Muslim or Jewish or Christian or so on. It is simply an issue of justice. So that means that it opens up to everyone in the world who has any kind of empathy with humanity to be a part of this cause for peace in Palestine. So what are your thoughts?
I can't highlight this enough, is to spread the word. As you said, there is a propaganda machine that is spewing lies and trying, and it's arming news outlets to promote those false narratives. The thing is, the first thing that people could do is to spread the word. Boycotting Israeli goods, boycotting companies that directly support the occupation, because all of this money that they're making is actually being utilized into making Palestinians' lives more unbearable.